ADHC Talks podcast, produced by the Alabama Digital Humanities Center at the University of Alabama Libraries. I'm your host, Sara Whitver. This video podcast documents digital humanities research through semi-structured conversations with DH scholars and practitioners. Our guest today is Dr. Xabier Granja. Dr. Granja is Associate Professor and Director of Undergraduate Studies in the Department of Modern Languages at the University of Alabama. He also works closely with the Artificial Intelligence Teaching Enhancement Initiative. His research interests focus on historical crime, specializing in 16th to early 18th century Spanish. His work deals with personal identity in the early modern period, the literary and socio-political implications of individual identity formation, and variations in didactic literature. Xabier is co-founder of humanAI, a multi-institutional research organization that explores AI in the humanities. He is project leader for RennAIssance, which seeks to leverage the power of AI to transcribe early modern Spanish printed texts. This project has been chosen for inclusion in the past 2 years by the Google Summer of Code program. Hi, Xabier. I'm so happy that you are here with us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm really excited about talking about your work. We haven't talked a lot about any computational projects on the podcast. And I'm especially curious towards the end to see if we can talk a little bit about your Google Summer of Code participation, because I think that's something that a lot of people should pay more attention to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump into our first question. It's a standard question that I ask everyone. It's my passion question. It is the one that I love the most. What makes you feel nerdy?
I feel like when you feel nerdy all the time, there's not one thing that makes you feel nerdy. I do like to say that learning is what interests me, really, about anything. Uh, all the podcasts that I listen to are essentially me learning history about things. Like there's one that I love that is called This Podcast Will Kill You, which is about viruses over the history of humanity, and they give you like history and then the biology of it. And it's so entertaining to me, right? Which is
Yeah.
probably very nerdy because it's just learning about something that has nothing to do with what I do. But I will learn about that, or I will learn about just doing plumbing in your house, which I have done myself by just YouTube. And so I think that makes me pretty nerdy to just do the plumbing myself before I call a plumber. So
Yeah.
learning to maybe to a fault.
Yeah. I think Curious Mind. I am currently listening to an episode of the Nature podcast on a book called Apocalypses.
Hmm.
And it's about all of the different identifiable apocalypses
Nice.
in the history of the universe
Cool.
and how humans have survived and reacted to them.
Hmm.
Instead of like putting the apocalypse as something that has never happened, but we're all just waiting for.
Right. We survived what, 2000? We survived 2012. What's the next apocalypse?
That's
There's one
right.
coming, I'm sure.
That's right. So curious person, tell me how you got involved in digital scholarship. Because, okay, before that, can you summarize just a little bit of sort of what your research is, and then go ahead and talk about how you started using digital methods
Yeah.
to do your research?
Okay, yeah. So, what I do is I teach a combination of literature and history. Although I am essentially a Hispanic literature professor, I combine both of them because I can't just work on literature devoid of historical context. So I rely heavily on the history. So I teach a lot of historical crime. I research a lot of historical crime. Mostly has to do with marital crime. So that kind of also gets me a lot into gender issues, usually of how men were supposed to behave, how women were supposed to behave in the Renaissance, in medieval times, which also kind of pulls me back to even like Aristotle, like Greek times, right? Because those are the bases that kind of evolve up to the Renaissance and after. So I look a lot into all those things. A lot of killings, a lot of sexual violence. So this is kind of my life and my research, right? This is what I look into, what I research, and then I kind of cross-reference that with literary works that are supposed to represent specific given time and what that says about either the aristocracy or the lower class. This is kind of the analysis that I usually do. So this is not usually something that screams, high technology and like artificial intelligence. Um, I've always been drawn to technology since I was a child. I think much of my interest comes from video games themselves. I've always been a video game player, and that kind of got me interested and fascinated by the advances in technology. The 90s were very good to us because the jumps in performance were just out of this world. Now it's different, right? It's slower, but
Yeah.
that kind of got me interested in how things work, how things process, how we process data, which is not, so divorced from how my brain processes data, right? When I do my research. So how does a machine process all of this? This is kind of how I've always been very much into the technology side of things, the digital humanities, how I can make my teaching more digital, my research more digital. I was very fast into getting comfortable and working in the cloud and then using different digital tools with my students, etc. So the way I kind of got much more into artificial intelligence, I had used it a little bit other than, you have like your other Google Home speakers where you ask it things and it can answer you and this and that. Um, so I'm currently an associate professor, and my dream project really is about this one woman who's called Luisa de Padilla. She was an aristocrat in the in the 1600s who was very, very religious, and she a very heavy Christian, and she saw all of this vice in society that she really wanted to eradicate because the nobility of the time went through many, many changes in what's aristocratic values and what is not appropriate for aristocracy. So she wanted to re-educate all of this with religion. And she has
Right.
four beautiful tomes that are super interesting, but they only exist in like Google Books scans. There is no transcribed version of this. It's a little hard to transcribe, but it doesn't exist. And so I want the world to have that in a transcribed form, published format that anyone can actually access and read in either a digital element or even to facilitate research, right? So that you can search through the text body, etc.
Mhm.
This was my project for after I become full, right? A full professor. So then I started looking at all of this optical character recognition and the things that AI can do, which again kind of started with my video games, where there are tensor cores that can kind of extrapolate from a small image. Because since I play my video games, I can render them at a lower resolution and then blow them up to 4K with tensor cores that are predicting the detail that is supposed to be there. And I kind of started thinking, well, can I do that, but with text when we do that optical character recognition? And it turns out that there's not much work on that, but there is some work being done on that. And I thought, why, instead of waiting until I become full professor and actually start working on this and manually transcribe hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, can I train an algorithm to do the bulk of the work? And then I can just, fix, edit, and get it to a final polished version. And it kind of gave me a win-win scenario where I can get the dream project that I want to do, whether it's by the time I get full or after, or meanwhile, or before. But at the same time, it's a really interesting research prospect where I get to learn more about how computers process and how AI processes data and how then I can apply that to the humanities because AI and humanities are not usually a connection that you see. The world seems to think that it's only about computers and only about other science, STEM projects. Like, no, no, we can definitely use high-tech technologies in the humanities. We need them. We just need to remind the world that, for the projects for which we can use them. And this is kind of what converged those sides of my life that have always been parallel, and now I'm able to kind of like put them together, really.
It's always so nice when that is able to happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like specific concrete examples of what you're talking about with the video game expanding the so I'm a big Skyrim player and I
Oh,
play on
nice.
my Switch, but my Switch is docked to a projector that is a full wall.
hmm
And so usually after I leave my office in the afternoon, I go for about an hour and play Skyrim, which is my entire living room wall. And
Nice.
the fact that it can render so beautifully on my living room wall is just, it just blows my mind every single
Right.
time.
And that's part of what the Switch 2 now has actually moved to Tensor Cores because it is using an NVIDIA Tegra processor in this case. It was before, but the new ones basically take a smaller resolution and through AI, through machine learning and using those Tensor Cores, it's blowing it up to 4K. So
Yeah,
it will look
I
even better. That's what I have in my
can't
computer at
wait.
home too. And that's
Yeah,
that's why, I have a piece of hardware that I use for gaming, which is great. But I can use that piece of hardware. The same tensor cores can process machine learning. That's what
yeah,
blowing up an image in the resolution is.
right,
So, it kind of doesn't feel like I'm being efficient if I'm just using it for gaming when I could actually,
right.
as we talked later about the Google Summer Code, I can use that kind of processing and do it at home in my gaming GPU.
Yeah. So you've brought up, how you got into this new project. Do you want to talk technical stuff about the project? What would you like to tell us about the project? And sort of,
So,
because I think last time I heard you speak, you were talking a lot about how you don't code, but you're
mhm,
involved in this huge coding project, and
right.
like conceptually you have this vision, and how have you made those connections? I guess just walk us through how you, as a non-programmer,
Mhm.
figured out how to get started and how
Sure.
to make connections. Because that's, I think, one of the big things in digital humanities is that a lot of us have these conceptual visions
Mhm.
and no technical knowledge.
Right. Yeah, no, that's me. I have no idea how to code. I know about humanities, not about coding. So, okay, so
Yeah.
I'll let's go through a little bit of how I got to Google Summer Code, which kind of then explains a little bit how all of this happened, and then I can show you maybe like a couple examples so that you see a little bit of what we're working on. So when I started, what we were talking about before, right? Like I had this realization. I was like, well, how can I make this happen? And of course, now the next step is, well, how do you get to that point, right? How do I get to do this if I don't know how to code anything? So I am the type of person who will never stop asking questions to an annoying point, but I've always maintained that I would rather ask a million questions than not know and lose an opportunity or something doesn't get done because I didn't ask a question for fear of
Right.
looking ignorant or stupid. Like, no, if I don't know, I'm going to ask. And people who know me know that even though I can be a little overbearing with questions, it comes from a place of improvement, right? How can we move to a better place? So I ask a lot of questions. And so when I started thinking, well, I don't know how to code, I don't know how to do any of this, but I do have the idea for the project, and I have an idea of how we could work on this. So I'm going to ask the people who know about this stuff. So I started talking to several people in the sciences. This is how also why when your university organizes campus-wide events or like college-wide events, attend because you're gonna find people that you usually never find because they're not in your immediate sphere, and
Yeah.
you're going to talk to them, and I will ask them questions. And this is kind of how I ended up talking to a couple deans in the sciences. And they told me, you know what, like this and that person might be good people to contact in these departments. And this is kind of how I met my colleague, Dr. Sergey Gleiser, right, who is in a science field, nothing to do with mine. And he was interested in machine learning. So when I asked him, I'm like, hey, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do a kind of a machine learning based transcription method. Um, is there any avenue that you can think like how could we make this maybe work? Like if you have any ideas, I would love to get you a coffee and like talk together. And that's exactly what Sergey and I did. We got together and I told him this is what I want done. And then he told me like, okay, these are the several ways that we could go about doing this, right? Technically speaking. And so that coffee kind of turned into another meeting, and we started getting a process like, okay, this has legs, right? Um, this is when he suggested something that he had been doing for several years with other science programs, which is the Google Summer Code. And he told me this might be a really good way to start this work and see where it takes us. I had never heard of Google Summer Code before. And what it is, it's a summer program that Google organizes every summer. It's not guaranteed, but it's been going on for like 22 years. So, it's
Right.
probably going to keep going. Um, And they organize this event that lasts for, it depends. There's like small, medium, and large projects, but anywhere from like a few weeks to like 3, 4 months, more or less. We are actually right in the middle of GSOC, Google Summer Code, GSOC 2025, which will end exactly in 11 days. So
Okay.
my projects will end October 6th is my students' final exam presentation that they have, right? Evaluation. So the way this works is that at the beginning of the year, you kind of propose a project, right? You have to create kind of like a company of sorts. So they have to have a website, all the projects, etc. And you want to have a good amount of collaboration between different institutions if you can, because that will make you, a more stable proposal. And we proposed it like this. Then Google accepted it as a project, and they're like, okay, we're going to include you in the summer program. This is my first GSOC. So last year was my first one. This is my second. So after that, candidates from all over the world are going to apply. If they like your project, they will look at all the many projects that are proposed. If they like your project, you're gonna kind of give them a test of sorts. So like, well, try to solve this. And in our case, it was a very baby version of a transcription of just a few pages. We told them like, this is what we want. See what you can do. And so with that, we then evaluate those candidates, which come from all over the world, and we submit to Google. These are the people that are finalists. Would you be willing to fund any of these? And then they'll tell us how many they fund. We've been lucky in the past couple of years. We've had a good number of them funded. We had 4 the first year, and this year we had more, which is not usual, but I think they're liking our project, so they've given us that weight. So we have several programmers from Japan, from India, from the United Kingdom, from Finland, and from the United States, a little bit of everything, right? These are usually either 4th year or so undergraduate students in the sciences or master students. Some of them already have finished their master and like are also they have a job now. They're actually employees now, right? So they're kind of juggling a little bit of everything. The summer code is a very good opportunity for them because it's great for their CV and it's great for us because then it enables a project and a group, a research group to exist that where I don't know how to code, they are my coding team. And this coding team enables me to get that infrastructure ready. And I kind of guide, as a humanist, I guide where I want us to go. But there is a lot of, most of the bulk of the work is done by them, for which I'm very grateful to our team.
Yeah.
And we also use this research to then work on publications, presentations, because most of them are still students. So we push them a lot to present this work at a conference. Let's work on small papers. Like we also published an article last year from our first year of work. And one thing that I really like about the Google Summer Code is that they put the students first. Because you could see how this dynamic could end up being exploitative in some cases, where some faculty might just, do all the groundwork with the students and they get all the credit. You must credit the students first in any presentation or publication. That's a Google rule. Otherwise, you risk that they will not renew you because then you're abusing the system. So like the publication we did last year, all our coders are credited as first authors and the professors come second, right? And so they all now have a pretty decent publication in their record as undergraduates or master students that can only help them, right? So that's kind of a little bit of the general of how I got into this and how it's working so far. And let me show you a couple examples. Let me share my screen so you can see a couple of these. I'm going to share my desktop. Can you see it?
Yes.
So this is what we started with. This is the Padilla text. This is what I really want to transcribe for the future to create for the world. You see that it's print text, so it's easy in a way to read. It's still difficult for a machine to read it because it's not the expected printing that we have these days. There was sort of a standard printing back in the Renaissance, but each printer kind of had their standards, so there's many standards. And also it kind of depended whether they had coffee that morning or they were angry that morning or happy or they went for a walk, because their standard also varies from day to day, right? They make many variations, oftentimes because when you use a press, each of the characters would be made first of wood, depending on the money that the press would have, and eventually later in history, towards industrialization, it would be made of metal. So the metal you can press and press and press, you're going to be fine. But the wood will crack eventually. And so when you lose letters, you kind of start interchanging letters. So you change V's and U's are very similar, so you kind of interchange them. F's and S's also kind of change. So that is, and there's no rhyme or reason, right? So if you see here, for example, this word obispo, which means bishop, that's an F, which really that is an S. The word is spelled with an S. Sometimes you will find it with an F, sometimes we'll find it with an S, right? So there's no way to really predict, and that's what makes it hard. And this is kind of like the way the whole text will look, right? So this is where we started. From this, we've moved on a little bit to some other more complicated things like handwriting. This is something that we've been doing this year. This is an easier one. I could myself transcribe this manually somewhat comfortably. I can recognize the words quite well. I can read it, right? En esta villa de Lizarra a 9 de junio de 1800, whatever it is, right? I can read it. If I can read it, I can transcribe it. And it's quite clean and it's pretty well preserved, right? All of these documents come from different archives in Spain that I have visited, and I've been compiling data. This, for example, was not digitized by anyone. This is just me taking a decent picture and then processing it in Photoshop so I can have a decent quality material to work on later, right?
Yeah.
This is kind of how it looks. This is where we've moved on this year to try to do print and handwriting, right? Because we have more coders, so we have more projects. And getting a machine to read this is very, very hard. And then I'll give you one more example for you to see. This is my nightmare. This is what doesn't let me sleep at night. I can't read this. I mean, I've tried. It looks like an alien ship brought aliens to this planet. They gave this to the planet and then they left. And like, I don't know how to read this. Some of these are really complicated. We're not even bothering with this right now because it's too complicated. But these are the things that we're trying to read eventually, right? So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the materials that we're working on. And the whole process is just to have our coders get the code so that it reads several lines, different lines, like it kind of cuts the text in lines, processes it. We use a lot of ground truth. So we've, and I don't know, if maybe the listeners might not know what ground truth is. So that's just, it's a piece of text that basically says this line says that, this line says exactly that, right? So that way the code will learn what an R looks like, what an M looks like, what a B looks like, right? And that way start to learn how to read. It's not unlike children learning to read when they're young. Right. And that way, I've done a lot of manual transcriptions, also with my colleague, Dr. Harrison Meadows from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, who is also my colleague on this project. And so we transcribe a lot manually to have more ground truth. And the goal is to not have so much manual ground truth eventually so that the code can actually learn. But for it to be good enough to learn itself, you need to help it. And we're kind of in that middle ground where like it's getting quite good. We've gotten so far to like 95, 97% accuracy. Sounds really good. Sounds like an A+, and it is. But that's not good enough when you're doing thousands of pages. A 3% error rate is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things you need to fix. So I want to get to 99.99 perfection. We are getting kind of I don't want to say yet, but it kind of looks like we might have gotten to like 99 point something percent just a couple of weeks ago. But I need 2 more weeks for this specific contributor that's working on some updates. We'll see about the final project in 2 weeks when they finish, because they have to give me the whole presentation for the whole summer. The last code that we'll evaluate together with Dr. Gleiser, who's the machine learning specialist. We evaluate the code of like the quality of the transcription. And then this year, a new thing that I really wanted to do this year is whatever code we have, I've tasked everyone with making either a web-based or a local offline app. And we're going to release several little programs where you can use the AI algorithms we've trained and release them to the world for free. All of this is going to be shareware. And I'm going to be sending this to a lot of academics all over the world that I know. So like, just try it. Try to transcribe whatever your transcription needs are. Try it. Let me know what the issues are so that then next year I can go back to Google and say, okay, this has been really good, but these are the issues. Let's make another summer
Right,
program project to fix this so that we can evolve and improve. Sorry, that was a very
right.
long answer, but this is kind of the
I love
gist.
it. I appreciate you explaining some of the more technical things like what is ground truth because I know what ground truth is, but I didn't a
Right,
while back, right?
right.
And I think that um, there are a lot of people that I know on our campus, but I think this is a big thing in digital humanities right now, people wanting to transcribe old documents and be able to produce a critical edition or,
Yep.
some sort of either just to promote access to it or some of the stuff is just really cool, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
And OCR for historic primary sources is so complicated,
It
even
really is.
if, like your first example, it's in print. Um, and for example, the stuff that I'm working on is uh, much newer. It's from the 80s to 2000, but it's still
Mm-hmm.
producing the OCR for it is so difficult because just like your, Renaissance printers, it was a small publication. It was a
Mm-hmm.
historic newspaper, and it doesn't have standardized formatting from page to page, and it doesn't have standardized heading or titles and so, you run that through Python and it just gives you from this side of the page to this side of the page, no matter how many columns are there, and no matter what the like the font change or the text change
Mm-hmm.
or there's half of a title along with all of these other things. And it's it's been very challenging to train a model to recognize this is a column, like this white space around the column equals it doesn't go to anything else,
Correct,
you
correct.
know?
And add to that complexity the fact that we don't have millions and billions and millions of dollars
Yeah,
to either pay people or train things. We don't have that.
yeah,
So this is kind of where something like Google Summer Code is so useful because those students need the experienced opportunity. They get
yeah,
paid a little bit. Yeah, I don't know exactly how much it is, but they get a little bit of monetary incentive. But it's really just about the pedigree of, hey, I was accepted at this Google program and I'm doing this project, which is really cool. It's very good for them and it's good for us because then we get the support we need
yeah,
because we don't have that kind of money. We don't have that kind of funding in the
right.
humanities, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't be anywhere with my project if it wasn't for Jeff Turner, who was a previous guest on this podcast as well. But Jeff is one of our colleagues
Mhm.
and has spent quite a bit of time uh, working on training machine models for OCR of historic text as well. His example is the U.S. Congressional Record, which
Mhm.
also is not super old, but early 20th century, late
Still
19th
difficult.
century
Yep.
is still, and even with the Congressional Record, it's non-standard formatting
Mhm.
because they go from, publication to publication and change the columns and change the margins and change the font.
And
And
if you
so,
think about it, it kind of boggles my mind to think we live in such a digital world where everything is now preserved in some way digitally, that the vast amounts of knowledge that are recorded on paper that are either digitized but we cannot access because it's a picture, it's not actual reachable text. It's it's mind-boggling how much knowledge there is that we need to transcribe, not just for preservation purposes, which is an important goal unto itself,
right,
but to be able to access it. Because to me, it's the same difference as history. History is no good if you don't know it so that you don't repeat those mistakes. This is the
yeah,
same. You need that knowledge not just because it's nice to preserve materials, and I think it's crucial and fundamental to preserve them to know who we are as human, as a humanist, that's obviously what I'm interested in, but also because you will not be able to grow as a person, as a human, as a society if you don't
right,
have acute knowledge of what you've been before, because you don't know It's like if I start driving my car, I will eventually drive into a tree if I just don't have a direction. I use Google Maps so that I know where I'm going. So I need to know where I'm coming from to know where I'm going. It's the
Hmm.
same thing for humanity as a whole. And the fact that all of these documents are not digitally preserved in a reachable way
Yeah.
blows my mind that there has not been more work done on this. But it also, at the same time, it just, I like to say that when you're kind of pushed against the wall, if you don't have the funding and you don't have the knowledge, like I don't know how to code, if you don't have, if you're against the wall, you can do two things: accept that you're against the wall and then end, or reject the wall, break the wall, and then go to the other side. But just
Yeah.
you need to not be in that position and find what can I do to actually advance in any way. You see what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the true gifts of generative AI at this point,
Right.
because while we have all of these, privacy concerns and ethical concerns and climate concerns, we
Hmm.
also suddenly, non-technologists and non-coders have so much more access to some of these very technical problems that we
Absolutely.
can solve, and they were not solvable even if we had people with the technical expertise. The amount of time that it would take them
Hmm.
to produce the coding without machine learning and without being able to train a model, um, it would just it's just completely out of reach
Uh-huh.
until now. And so
That's that
suddenly
wall.
this stuff is in reach, and it's a whole new world.
The opportunities are, it kind of sometimes hurts my brain when I get excited about this. And like, there are so many potential opportunities that
Yeah.
I don't even know what to do. Like, you can actually get a little paralyzed by how many things you can do with it. So just like focus on, okay, these are the things that I can do. These
Yeah.
are the things that it enables. Let's go
Right.
get them.
Right. Right. Yeah. The scope creep is a little difficult to deal with sometimes.
But you start, it's kind of like people have always been, a lot of people have been afraid of the blank page. I've never had that because I just start writing. I don't expect what my first sentences to be good. They will probably never exist in the final version. But you
Right.
start somewhere. Instead of being
Yeah.
blocked by the possibilities, just start somewhere,
Yeah.
see where it takes you, and then you'll backtrack. You'll go back and fix and change because
Absolutely.
anything you do will evolve. And our
Yeah.
code even has evolved, and the reach of our project has evolved. Like we would never even thought of doing handwriting transcription last year, but as if we've gotten the work we've done and we've seen like this has actually quite a lot of potential, we've gotten a little greedier. Like, well, let's expand, see what happens, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I have one more standard question for you, and
Hmm.
that is, what's next? And I think you've sort of hit on it a couple of times, but
Right.
like, uh, you're welcome to include like bucket list things or
Sure.
like pie in the sky dreams. And I know from what I hear, you just decided that your pie in the sky dream was going to be your real dream. And
Right.
you're just sort of like, I'm going to do this.
Right.
So, like, once you finish that, what's going on?
It's kind of like when I fix something at home, I will try to fix it. Even I'll do electrical, and if then I fail, then I call the electrician.
Yeah.
At least I'm gonna try. So I'm trying this. It might, hopefully, I'm thinking it's gonna get me the bulk of the transcription done that then I can fix. But what am I doing now and what's coming next? Well, right now I'm still focusing. I'm doing this. I have a lot of things. My figurative stove has lots of pots and pans going on at the same time. So I'm working on my second monograph, which is all about all these historical crimes, etc. that I'm working on. I'm working a lot with the power of blood as an element in like judicial documents. It's not the same if someone hurts someone in either a socio-political way or a physical way. It's not the same if there's bleeding, right? There's like aggravating factors to different processes. So I'm working on that, finishing that book, which is really one of the requisites that I need to do to become a full professor. Um, that's about two-thirds of the way done. Hopefully by next year, I'm expecting to have the manuscript completely finished. And that's as I'm working on this other thing, right? On all the
Yeah.
AI stuff. So the goal then is obviously, as I said, to get to the point where I can just completely transcribe these 4 tomes and release them in some form to the world. And after that, I'm already kind of now that that's become more tangible in a way, because it used to be like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, to I'm doing this slowly, right? And I'm finding all this new research while I'm doing this. Really the next step after that, and I don't like to get too far behind because sometimes we can think too far into the future and then we forget that we're doing things right now, right?
Right.
Um, it's kind of growing beyond that 4 tome transcription project, which is okay, now what can we do with this that can not just transcribe for other things? Because really my goal has become I want as many humanities researchers to have access to transcription tools that are free as
Right.
possible. Because I always joke that I thought of starting to do this. I don't have the coding knowledge to do this. And I'm surprised that, multinational companies are not already working on this. They don't seem interested. I'm
Mhm.
guessing because it's more it sells more to have some kind of image recognition that tells you like, this is a car, this is a cat, or whatever it is. Like people use that in the consumer world more than this is a pretty specific, specialized professional application of AI and OCR.
Mhm.
But if baffles me that no one's really doing it, right? So we are
Yeah.
in like as little programs, like you are doing it too. Like it's many of us
Yeah.
researchers kind of doing this in little programs. So if I can become a millionaire out of it, then why should anyone else? If I have
Right.
this idea, why should somebody become a millionaire for my idea? So I want everyone to have it for free because then everybody wins, right? It's a much bigger win for everyone. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's why we want to release the apps for everyone and then
Yeah.
see what use people have.
Yeah.
But yeah, this will kind of bleed into over the years and into not just OCR, but I want to get more into like the creative side of things. There's a lot of text to video in AI happening now
Yeah.
with like Luma Labs, Google VO3, Runway, like all of these, they're producing really interesting results. They're also
Yeah.
quite expensive, and you have to
Yeah.
have a subscription for it, which again, funding wise, we don't always have. So
Right.
I would like to get into some of that because then it's not just creating transcriptions of text, then it's creating, I could actually create
Right.
video of whole
Yeah.
like scenes or things like that are really good for teaching materials and also just to help
Absolutely.
more, right?
Yeah, I'm working on a huge project because, the library is in different stages of renovation.
Hmm.
Soon, we're going to be doing the first floor, and the first floor is going to turn into the digital scholarship zone. And we are going to have VR equipment.
I was just thinking of VR. Yeah, same.
Mhm. So I am deep into the researching and writing a proposal for, what UA Libraries is going to do with our VR program as we move forward. And the timing is
Yeah.
right now. Um, and I think, we've had some VR headsets that have circulated in the past, and we've had some that we've run a little bit of programming with, but we haven't had like a formal VR program.
Sure.
And I'm excited to see how that shapes up. I
Hmm.
really am excited about the period of time that I have in the next couple of months to sort of circulate around campus and see what people's VR dreams are and like what people feel like they need and then figure out, what capacity we have to help with that.
Right. I
Because we
mean,
won't be
this.
able to help with all of it.
No, of course, we can't do it all, right? You only have one lifetime. That
Yeah.
my husband often tells me like, stop trying to fix the world. You can't fix everything. You don't have time in 100 years if you get to live 100 years if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So there, you have to choose something. But as you were talking about the VR headsets and the VR space, it also, again, it brings me back to the humanities and it brings me back to video games because there are
Yeah.
multiple. I mean, I'll tell you, for example, one of a very well-known video game franchise is Assassin's Creed. And
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed happens through times in history. And
Yeah.
we have not faithfully reproduced, but very close to faithful maps of like Renaissance Rome And that also exists in museums, and that is something that can be read by machines, and then that can be applied to a 3D world that can be built more or less automatically, but also it will require manual input. But this is what video game companies are also now using machine learning to like create textures, right? So you don't need necessarily a full team of like 500 coders and builders and artists and engineers, and you can have something at a smaller scale create that environment and then use
Yeah.
that in educational purposes where
Yeah.
you can have students read plays or whatever it is that you're doing, and then have them jump into a VR space and understand the physicality of what they're reading.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's going to be so cool.
Yeah. Again, the opportunities are so many that it kind of like
Yeah. And where do
gets
you
you back.
start?
Yeah.
I mean, the more I dig into it, the more I'm like, oh my God, where do you start?
Uh-huh. But that's my advice is just pick one thing that you like about it and start with that, and then it will take you to other things
Yeah.
because you're never going to be able to do it all. So pick the one that interests you most now and then
Yeah.
work through it, and it will open up. It's just tentacles start happening, and then it
Yes.
starts
Yeah.
reaching other things. And that's the beauty of it, really. That's how you know that I always hear like, oh, the humanities are doomed, or like the humanities are relevant. Like, not really, like, because everything that I keep doing keeps opening more doors, and people keep being surprised, like, oh, you guys in the humanities can do that? Like, yes, we can, and we are doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Final bonus question that I didn't send to you. What's your favorite video game?
Oh, that is difficult. That is very difficult to answer. What is my favorite video game?
I
I do
mean,
like a lot of indies. Indies are really fun because they're usually like less than 15 hours. Um, I do like I am a sucker for a good Metroidvania kind of platformer. So I will say this might be a weird choice, but I will say the two Ori games. There's I forget, the first one is Ori and something of the Forest, and the second one is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. And it's kind of
Oh,
a side-scrolling Metroidvania. It is beautiful. It has fantastic mechanics, and I appreciate when a game can have good fluidity, and it just keeps letting me discover new environments and
I love
secrets.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ori games, ORI, if you've never heard them,
ORI.
Ori.
I am definitely going to look it up the minute we get off of this.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
easily. So I don't know if they're my favorite because it's very hard to choose, but I
It's so hard to
actually just
choose. It's like,
I,
do you choose
I
the one that
look.
you spent the most time on? Do you choose the one that you come back to again and again? Do you choose the
That's
one
what
that,
makes it a hard choice because
yeah,
I get together with a friend of mine, and we usually talk about video games, and we like to go for walks and like explore nature. And we were looking at my Steam account, and I have more than 500 games in my Steam account over the past 20 years that I've
yeah,
owned it. So how do you choose? There's just two,
yeah.
different types of your life, different stages of your life. There's a favorite, but Ori, I think, is a very good thing for people to try.
I love it. I love that recommendation. Thank you for that recommendation. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up. I thank you so very much for joining me for this episode of ADHC Talks.
Thank
And
you,
I did
Sarah, for
not say
having me.
ADHD talks, which sometimes comes out of my mouth. I myself struggle with ADHD quite a bit. So it's been so good to talk to you, and I have been enjoying getting to know you, and I really look forward to more conversations and doing stuff together because I think we have some common interests.
Absolutely.
So thank you for your generosity,
Likewise,
and
Sarah.
I will see you later.
This episode of ADHC Talks has been brought to you from the campus of the University of Alabama. This is Sara Whitver. Join us again next time to hear more about DH folks and their super cool projects. Goodbye.